Hi everyone, I hope you are well. Welcome to this webinar from Union Learn, which is on ways to manage stress in the current climate. My name is Louisa Smith and I'm a project officer at Union Learn, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Before I introduce today's speakers, just a few sort of housekeeping points to do with the platform that we're using today, Crowdcast. Just to say, down the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a chat panel. Please make use of that, say hi to everyone and share ideas throughout the webinar too. I see some of you have been doing that already, which is great to see. Also, my Union Learn colleagues will be on hand to answer any questions that you have there, and also we'll post up any useful links that we mentioned throughout the webinar too. But if you have a question for one of the speakers, please make use of the Ask a Question option that's at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get around to answering those later on in today's webinar. We would like to apologise in advance for any difficulties we may have with regards to sound or visuals. We'll try to sort out any problems as quickly as we can. And my colleague Yusuf is behind the scenes, so he'll help us out if we come across anything, but fingers crossed we won't today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Union Learn webinars page and the Union Learn YouTube channel soon. So, as I said, this webinar is on ways to manage stress in the current climate. 2020 has certainly taken its toll on many areas of our lives. And in this webinar, we will look at possible causes of stress, how it can affect us, and things we can do to manage it. I'm delighted to be joined today by two speakers. First up, we have Tracy Dowthwaite. Tracy is founder of Way to Wellbeing, is a training expert, facilitator, and consultant with 30 years' experience in the wellbeing and mental health field. She has worked in frontline mental health services, enabling those with long-term conditions to lead meaningful lives. She is open, inclusive, and engaging, and she focuses on the importance of proactively supporting well-being in and out of the workplace for all and reducing stigma around mental health. So great to have you with us today, Tracy. We're also joined as well by Mick Brightman. Mick is a learning organiser at the trade union community. Mick has a background in the footwear and textiles industry and the trade union movement, being involved in the promotion and development of workplace learning with members and their employers. He has worked for Community and the TUC, which has involved working across many different industrial sectors with a wide range of learning development needs and requiring unique solutions to empower people's development, including apprenticeships, functional skills, higher education, and mental health awareness. So a warm welcome to you both. Thanks ever so much for joining us. If it's okay, Tracy, we'll start with you in your presentation, if that's okay.
Lovely, thank you. And thank you for that lovely introduction. Very nice. So I'm just going to go in, everybody. I'll just say hello first because you'll sort of lose me a little bit. I'm going to go in and share a presentation. I'm just going to talk around stress and some of the things we can do, some of the proactive things we can do to manage our stress, but also build in a little bit of understanding about why we feel stressed at times, because I think that understanding then enables us to make choices, to make decisions that can hopefully help us to manage that stress. I'd like to thank, before I start, everyone for welcoming me here today. I have been working with ASLEF for the last couple of years, so have a bit of understanding around how the union reps work and how the learning reps work and the support that people give out there. So it's great to be invited to sort of a wider circle of union reps today. So I'm just going to go in and share my presentation, which isn't coming up, obviously. That would be too good, wouldn't it? Okay. So hopefully, I'm just checking before I go on. Can everybody see my presentation? I can't see anybody. So if there is a problem, can somebody yell and let me know? If not, I'm going to kick off and start going.
We can't see it, Tracy.
You see? Thank you. Let me just go out. Why is that not coming up? See, we've just practiced this and it was all fine. I'm just going to go back in, up here, open. Nope, see, it's good, isn't it? We just all hold on a minute. We should hopefully be able to find it again. I'm just going to go in a different way and see whether that will work. See, this is good for help people seeing what stress levels look like. Me trying to find my presentation now. Okay, let's go back into here. It's not coming up on my application window at all now.
Have you got it open, Tracy, in PowerPoint?
Yeah, I have. It's open behind the screen in PowerPoint, and then I go to application window, and there is nothing there. If I put it in a Chrome tab, no, it's not there either.
Right. Apologies, everybody, for this. Tracy, just as a bit of a workaround, are you able to send it to me in an email? And what I can do is I can run it from this end. So I am just going to ping you an email now, and then if you can just reply to it with a presentation, I can share my screen from this end.
I'm just replying to your email that I had from you before, from you. And then, okay.
Apologies, everybody. We will get there.
Is everybody enjoying me just fiddling around with my computer for a little while? Are we all finding this good? I've now got to go back in and find it. Here we go. Open. Oh, it now won't attach, will it? Because I've got it open in 6 different ways. Okay, so hopefully that is now sending to you. In the meantime, I'm just gonna keep chatting. I'm gonna cancel that out. So hopefully, Yusuf, you can fiddle with that in the background, and I'm just gonna introduce some stress, because that was a little bit of stress. How did we all feel around that? That was all good, wasn't it? So, and I've just practiced it just before we came on, so it's always good to have a practice, isn't it? And yeah, not quite sure what happened in there. While Yusuf is fiddling in, hopefully in the background, I can certainly just be explaining some of the introductory points that are on there. Yeah, it is. It's definitely deliberate. Thank you, Michelle. Perfect. So stress is very much around where we feel out of our comfort zone, which I'm feeling at the moment. And often when we feel that we're not in the place that we should be, there is something between how we're leading our lives at that moment and what is actually happening underneath that is sort of at odds with itself. And when we start to think about stress, this can often be that point where we sort of feel that push and pull between ourselves. The slides aren't up yet. I'm leaving Yusuf to fiddle around. So if you're still waiting for them, and I'm gonna keep talking about what would be on my slides in the meantime. So I'm not holding you all up for ages. So when we talk about stress currently at the moment, it's really important to remember that stress often comes from this feeling of uncertainty and the feeling of change. These are the two things that we find most challenging when we're dealing with stress. So change and uncertainty are a real struggle for us. And part of that is because our brains are wired still back to prehistoric times when, you know, we needed to be looking out for any changes or any uncertainties because they could be a threat to our life. You know, if the crops weren't growing, or if there was a saber-toothed tiger coming over the hill about to get us in the cave, you know, we needed to have that alert system on. And the trouble is, our brains actually haven't evolved very much since that time. So we're still in that sort of fight or flight mode a lot of the time, which isn't so great when your slides aren't working. You know, that's not actually going to help me if I start running away, is it, or doing something. So it's about how do we manage and how do we understand why we're feeling like that. So I think that the first point I always like to bring up when I'm talking about stress is bringing that acceptance and understanding that when we're going through uncertainty, as we certainly have been over this last year, you know, it's constant change, constant uncertainty. It can easily bring us to that point of stress and not being able to manage. I'm just going to check in with Yusuf. Are we getting anywhere with the slides, or are we stuck?
No, the email still hasn't come through to me yet, unfortunately. So as soon as it does, I will bring the slides on screen.
Okay, no worries. I'll just keep going. I can talk with that slide, so it's all good. You get to see me more, and I get to notice that the chat, so it's all good. So when we're thinking about stress, there are a few main areas, really, isn't there? So we've got the change, we've got the uncertainty, and this can be at home, it can be at work, it can be within the family. And what we're looking to do when we're thinking about how we manage our stress is just bring some awareness to the different areas that are maybe causing us stress at the moment. So the first thing I'd like you to do, as you're in the chat box, maybe you could be sharing some of your stresses that are going on for you at the moment. So whether these are big stresses at home or at work, it could be around redundancy and job security, which I know is happening for many people. It could be around your health, or your fear for other people's health. It could be around all sorts of different things, but it can also be around some of those small things. So, going out this morning without your umbrella and ending up coming back soaking wet. All these add to stresses. So if anyone wants to add some little stresses in the chat box, because it's really nice when what we get when we're sharing stresses is we're sharing how that we're not the only person in that situation, that we're not alone with that stress, that many people are feeling different stresses at any point in time. And building that sort of community and that connection about how we're experiencing stress can make a real difference. So that is one of the first things. So yeah, lovely. If you can start sharing some, we can build that community of how we understand stress. I think some of the things that always come up, the children always come up, love them. Parents often come up as well, love them. So and partners, and so we all, a lot of the things that also give us meaning and really support us in life also can cause stress for us. Work clothes. It's interesting, commuting always used to come up when I used to do this, and now some of us are even actually missing that commute. So it's interesting how stresses can change over time. And obviously there are some, real big stresses around, our mental health and our well-being. Yay! And I have a presentation. Isn't that exciting? God, my stress level's gone down massively now. It's lovely. So this is what I'm talking about. So our different stresses that we have in our day-to-day life. Please keep adding them in and keep talking to each other as well, because building those connections is really key. So what we all have is our stress container, which holds our stresses. And the first thing to be aware of when we think about our stress container or our stress bucket is that we all have a different vulnerability to stress, a different understanding of the impact of stress on us. So some of us may have a big container and we can cope with lots of stress, but for other people that is smaller, and just a few bits of stress can really bring them to that point. Have we all been to this point where our bucket is full and we can't cope with any more? So what happens, day in, day out, is different stresses come in. So some of them are these huge stresses that some of you are sharing and, that are really, really challenging. And then we also have the small ones as well. And it's often the small ones which bring us to this point where we feel we're going to overflow and I can't cope with one more thing in my bucket today. It's often the kids, isn't it, when they haven't done the washing up, just get that explosion. And although that might be a bit annoying that someone hasn't done the washing up, that isn't really the full story. The full story is everything that's going on for us underneath and how we address that. So I think it's really good to bring awareness to what's in your bucket. This can be a really nice self-reflective exercise. Just spend some time bringing awareness to what's happening for you at the moment. And then we're going to go on to look at some of the coping strategies in another slide in a minute. And then bring awareness to what it feels like when your bucket is full. So what sort of person are you? Are you the person that's, maybe snapping and shouting? Are you a bit of a stomper? Do you sort of, throw things about, bang things down? Do you get really quiet? Do you go into yourself when you feel like that? Do you get tearful? Because all of these can be signs of a build-up of stress that we haven't addressed. And it's bringing that awareness so you understand that build-up of stress that can then allow us to make some decisions and make some choices so we can manage the stress. So I would really recommend using the stress container, and there are loads of resources out there to bring some awareness to what's in your stress container. You will see we have a little tap on the side, which is great. What we want to do is let that tap out so we don't get to this point, of snapping. And there are some not so great coping strategies which we can use to manage our stress. So if we're using, drink or drugs or overworking to manage our stress, long term, that's not going to be a great way of managing. It's actually just going to add other things in our bucket. So what we want to do is focus on some of the good coping strategies, which we're going to look at in a minute. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the other part, when we're thinking around how we manage our stress, is thinking about what we can control and what we can't control. So at the moment, this little picture that I've got here is specifically around COVID, but this can be used around anything to think about what things we're worrying about or concerning ourselves with, which are outside of our circle of control. Now, if you look here, we've got things like, how long the crisis will last, how others will react, other people's motives. All of these things are actually outside of our control, but probably we spend a lot of time thinking about them and ruminating on them. And when you think about that, that's just adding to our stress without actually being able to do anything practical about that. Where we want to focus is in this inner circle. What can we control? How can we focus on what we can control? So for me, this is definitely limiting my social media and turning off the news. I'll dip in and out so I know what's happening, or have some understanding. But you can just spend your time, can't you, re-watching the news or scrolling through some of the negativity on social media. And that, for me, really has an impact on my stress. So I make a decision to step away from that, to sort of look after myself a little bit. And you can use this model around anything. So you can use this model around the workplace, for example. So what are some of the things that are out of your control that maybe you're focusing on and you're concerning yourself about? And if we take redundancy, and maybe, funding cuts, which is going to impact people's jobs next year, we may not have any control about what's happening with the funding. What we can have control about is how we react to this, what we practically do about this, job-wise, or maybe preparing our, getting our building connections and thinking about what maybe are our next steps if that becomes the case, thinking about how we're looking after ourselves as this becomes more stressful for us. So rather than worrying about the things that are outside of that circle. So really, sometimes it's about also accepting that change is going to happen and letting go of that all or nothing thinking, because we can get very much caught up in that when we're caught up in that negativity. And unfortunately, our brains all have this negativity bias. So again, this goes back to our, being in the cave, looking out for the saber-toothed tiger. It's good to be on that alert, but that means we hold on to the negatives and we don't always hold on to the positives, or we don't hold on to the positives. So trying to see what are the positives in any situation is, again, a really good way of helping us manage our stress. Now, that can be really challenging. Some of these big situations that we're going through, trying to find positives, it can be challenging. But it's finding the positives in day to day, the small things that are still okay for me. sorry, I'm reading Dogs Are My Saviours, which is definitely true. So holding on to our dogs and finding the positive, the small things. And I'll go back and look at that a little bit more in a minute. So can I have the next slide? I quite like saying this. I feel like I'm on TV or something. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to focus now on some of the things we can do to be managing our stress. So I guess we've brought awareness to what's happening. We're bringing a bit of understanding and acceptance to where we are with our stress. And now we're moving on to some of the things we can do to alleviate that stress and look after ourselves a little bit more. And the 5 ways to well-being are really great research-based, evidence ways, things that are good for our well-being. So just as we know what's good for our physical health, these are the things that are good for our mental health. So, we know what's good for our physical health. Doesn't mean we always do it, let's be honest. But we know, don't we? We know the things we should be doing to look after ourselves. And this is how we can prioritise our mental health and our well-being, and we can release some of our stress. Really simple, small things. And as we go through and look at them, you could actually do one activity and it could tick off all of the 5 ways to well-being. And I think one of the really important things to remember as we go through the 5 ways to well-being, just noticing that you're actually doing the 5 ways to well-being when you're chatting with a friend. Oh, actually, I'm connecting. That's one of the 5 ways to well-being. That actually has that impact on your brain that it reinforces you're doing something good for yourself. So just noting that you're doing one of them as you're going about your day-to-day life, just that on its own will have an impact on your well-being, because a lot of these things you'll already be doing. So, connection, and that's changed, hasn't it, this year? And, for a lot of people, for myself, I live alone. I work, in my spare room now, talking into a computer. It can be quite isolating. It can be challenging. So it's about really putting yourself out there and putting yourself forward to think about how we link to, other people, how we can find new ways of connecting with people, and thinking about, doing things slightly out of the ordinary, new ways, and constantly finding new people as well to connect with. So you're expanding your world and it's not getting smaller and smaller. And then we have be active, which can be anything, whatever works for you. I've put there yoga, cycling, walking, but, whatever way you're active. It doesn't have to be that, we're training for a marathon or we're really out there or we're going there. It can be really small things, but making sure you're doing them as much as possible. And I'm not going to say do these things every day or make sure you're doing so many minutes a day, because then we've got a stick to beat ourselves with if we don't do them. So again, that's adding to our stress. But do what you can when you can, as much as you can, and find something that works for you, because then you're much more likely to do it. There's been lots of research about the importance of learning, the importance as we age of keeping learning, the importance of how that impacts our mental health, but also how it impacts people with dementia, etc. So keeping learning, and that doesn't have to be formal things, can be really small things where we can, doing a crossword or, doing a little online course can be really good for us. And then I've got giving, which is not giving of our money, which is nice, but giving of our time. So that can just be really listening to your mum when she calls you and you're only half listening and you're cooking the dinner, but actually really being there. And again, it's that connection, that giving of your time for people. Sharing ideas is another really nice way of giving, which you could be doing in the chat as we're going through. And then taking notice, which for me is what really works and is key, and everything, all different things work for different people. But I practice mindfulness every day because I feel that keeps me really centered and keeps me settled. And I also get outside as much as I can. So being outside is really good for me. And you can take notice. So it doesn't have to be formal mindfulness practice. You can take notice walking around the park at the flowers or the trees that are changing. So it's about being present, taking notice. And being present is really important for our brains because it gives them that step back. So if we're constantly in the future, that's where worry comes, where stress often comes, and where anxiety comes. If we're ruminating on the past, that's where depression can lie. So if we can be in the present and take notice of what's happening, that can really improve our well-being. And our last slide. Thank you. So sort of following on from thinking about the 5 ways to well-being and how we can link them into a bit of self-care, because that's what this is about. When we're talking about our stress levels, we need to be prioritising our self-care. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that we still feel that somehow that's selfish, or we shouldn't be doing that, or we should just be giving to everybody else all the time. Actually, this is our lives. You know, if I can't look after myself, how can I expect other people to do that for me? If I'm not being a good role model to my children or my family or my work colleagues by showing that self-care is important, how can I expect them to do that? And also, if I want to care for other people and be there for other people, I can't do that unless I'm looking after myself. So it goes back to that old phrase, you know, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So we need to be topping up our own self-care and our own understanding of what we need in order to be able to manage our stress levels, but also be there for other people. And I've also put the big word there, self-compassion, which is even another step further on from self-care. So, you know, giving ourselves that kindness that we'd expect to give to other people, especially this year, you know, so thinking about, actually, I'm trying my best at the moment. It's been a really tough year and I'm actually doing my best. Well done me, almost that pat on the back. Showing yourself that self-compassion is really important. And I've put in my little pie chart there of what I'm doing at the moment that's good for my well-being. You know, yours will be completely different. You will have different things that are good for you. So it's about thinking about, do you know what's good for you? Most of us do. Second big question, are you doing it? And how often are you doing it? And I think it's thinking about what different things help you in different ways. So I've put there, like, bubble bath is quite a small one. I like a bubble bath, but it's not great for my well-being. Where being in nature is the thing that I know I need to do regularly to make me feel good, to look after myself. So it's thinking about as well how much time you spend on different things, because we can easily get stuck in a rut of doing the same things and not having that range of things that are good for our well-being. And a way of helping yourself doing that is having a little plan, actually diarising some time for your self-care, and maybe having a self-care buddy as well. So you can, you know, be supporting each other and trying to help each other to be able to manage to keep doing these things, because it's keeping that motivation going that is key. And the last couple of points just to bring up, if you are really struggling, reach out for support as well. So if your stress levels are here and you're finding that, you know, you're constantly tipping over and you are struggling, there are lots of services out there. I'm sure there are lots of resources within your unions, but there are also lots of helplines out there. So please do reach out for support, because the earlier you can do that, the better your recovery is going to be, and the quicker you can get back to actually enjoying life a little bit more. And you can do that by really showing some gratitude to the small things that are happening in your life as well. So I think when we're talking around how we manage our stress, gratitude is key to that. So I keep a gratitude diary. Every night I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, and 3 really small things, because the big things don't happen day in, day out, do they? But the small things do, if we can just start to notice them. That will really change our relationship with stress and make a difference. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop there and hand back. So thank you very much, and thank you for my slides.
Really useful. I think lockdown sort of highlighted more than ever the importance of well-being and the sort of need to prioritise self-care, which I think that showed really well. And also, just to say, I think my colleague Keith put it in the chat, Union Learn have produced an e-learning module on the 5 ways to wellbeing, which Tracy mentioned. So I'm sure many of you will find that useful. And also, when it comes to sort of sessions and things, as part of our learning at home and our autumn festival of learning, we ran a number of sessions on like mindfulness, laughter yoga, and meditation, which were all like highly attended. And we're hoping if you found those useful, do let us know, and hopefully we can run some more sessions in the new year too. And some of them are available on our YouTube channel. But I see lots of tips that people have included in the chat there for things they do as well to help de-stress themselves. So that's great. Okay, so now Mick, if it's okay, I'll move on to you and ask a couple of questions for you, if that's all right. My first question is, what has Community, the trade union, been doing with regards to stress and in particular mental health?
Community is long championed mental health and particularly around stress as well. And we introduced a charter that many of our companies that we're involved with are actually signed up to. And we run a number of courses across the country, not just inviting our reps and their members to attend, but also their employers as well, because at the end of the day, a badly worded email, and in particular, a lot of people now working from home, a badly worded email can raise people's stress levels beyond control, because people start worrying about, do they want me to do this or the other? So Community ran a series of mental health courses, not just for the reps, like I say, for their employers as well. And if anybody's interested, if they go onto our website and put in their mental health and the charter, there's a load of resources in there they can surely have a look at and maybe take part and take it back to their own unions and try and get things moving with that. We have also been delivering sort of stress busting programs as well, which have been really, really helpful. Very similar to Tracy's presentation, and I have to say that was really good. How she dealt with the first part of that, I don't know. I'd have been turning the camera off going, bad internet connection. And so she's done really, really well to sort of deal with that. And again, quite the thing that's come from that is this stress is all around what control we have. Currently, we don't have any control over, whether it's lockdown, whether we're in tier 1, tier 3, tier 2, or whatever. That does affect us. And I noticed by the chats there, a lot of people were saying, not being able to socialise really causing them stress. And it is, again, being able to talk to people, whether that's on mediums like Zoom or Crowdcast or whatever it is really, really helpful. One of the things from sort of delivering stress busting programs, I came across the worry tree. And if people want to Google that, just type in there the worry tree. And then you can actually see what you can do in terms of control. Is there something I can do about it? Well, no. Okay, well, if you can't do anything, then try and forget it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But have a look. Search it out on the internet. You'll find that really, really useful. Plus the other things that we're doing as well through our online platforms, we're offering people opportunities to look at mental health, particularly around COVID. And we run a program, or there is a program on there, mental health first aid, so people can actually sign up and do that if they're interested. Okay.
Mick, you mentioned the stress busting sessions. I wondered if you had any advice for reps supporting their colleagues.
Advice for reps supporting the colleagues is, how can I put, okay. A lot of the time the stress is self-imposed because we see something and we don't share it. And Tracy picked up on the point of communicating with colleagues. In good times when you can have face-to-face sessions, a lot of the time when you get a group of people together and you say, okay, what's causing you stress? What causes you stress? What comes back from that is the fact that somebody will say, well, it's work, it's an IT system, it's the pressure of work, it's delivery targets or whatever it happens to be. And the person sitting next to them, who maybe they work with every single day of the year, suddenly turns, do you know what? That causes me stress. What if we did something? So it's about sharing that, what causes you stress. The biggest barrier that I think is out there is that mental health and stress are still seen as the devil. Nobody likes to admit that they've got stress or they're being stressed, because it appears to be a sign of weakness. And going back to the saber-toothed tiger jumping over the hill, yes, as long as you can run quickly, you can get away from it. But if you share that stress without being judgmental, it helps people deal with their issues.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And just to say as well, we've shared in the chat there the charter that community have produced, and also the guide there, which is a mental health in the workplace, a guide for community reps, but it's useful for anyone, isn't it, Mick, to have a look at that?
Anybody can take a look at it. It's there for, to share. If you can take that back into your own branch or whatever, fantastic.
Brilliant. I was going to go to some questions now, but we haven't got any. If anyone has got any questions, please put them in the ask a question area. But I do have some here that I got earlier. Tracy, I noticed in your presentation you featured journaling, and that's become sort of a popular thing at the moment. I wondered if you wanted to say any more about that and how it can help people.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of exploring how we're feeling at any point. I think it's interesting, although we're often caught up in our minds, journaling sort of gives you that little opportunity to take a step back and just explore what's causing that, or how you're feeling. So for me, I often journal if I've had quite a difficult day, and in the evening I might just sit down and write about what's happened during that day. And then it sort of you can start to pull out, okay, why did I find that particularly difficult? So, for example, I don't particularly find it difficult if my slides don't work or the internet goes down, because I'm used to doing that. It's just, okay, that's just life. But I might find it particularly difficult if I had, a difficult conversation with somebody, or somebody was, being sort of argumentative back to me. I'm not very good at confrontation. So that would be something that I might find a little bit more difficult. So I would be writing down about what had happened, and then maybe writing down some of my feelings about that. And what that gives us is then an opportunity to explore, okay, where does that come from? Is that actually about that conversation, or is it actually about, a conversation with somebody 2 years ago that I still haven't quite let go of, or something that happened in my childhood that I haven't quite let go of? It just helps us bring that awareness a little bit more to what's happening, day-to-day life, really.
Yeah, and I think it can really help, can't it? Just even writing things down. And they say, don't they, before you go to bed, write down what you've got planned for the next day. And obviously you mentioned the gratitude diary as well can be really useful for people.
Head as well, it doesn't even have to be that deep. It's almost just, okay, I've got that out of my head now. It's not ruminating round and round for me for a lot of times.
Definitely. Okay, we've had a couple of questions in. Thanks, everyone. One question is, have you got any quick stress relievers for the moment when we might snap at the moment? Any sort of quick stress relievers?
I guess so. There's a couple of ways you can go with it. If you've got if you're at that point where you're sort of about here, that's because we're flooded with adrenaline because we're feeling really stressed. So we want to try and get rid of that adrenaline. So doing something physical, something active, can be really helpful. Even if it's a silly dance in your room or jump up and down, can get rid of some of that adrenaline. Or the other way is just to really connect with your breathing. So I always, if I root my feet to the floor, that's my way. I'm doing it now, sitting in this chair. I just really plant my feet on the floor. I feel as though like I'm a tree with roots going down. And then I just focus on my body and my breathing, and focus on the feeling of my feet on the floor. And that just takes me out of my mind, because it's my mind whirring around that's bringing me that stress point. So it can just sort of brings me back into my body and into the floor. That's what works for me anyway.
Brilliant, thank you. Someone's put, I often find that that things to relieve stress, projects, learning, exercise, end up causing me more stress because they become one or more obligation. Any suggestions on finding a balance? I guess this sort of ties into, I was thinking about New Year's resolutions, isn't it? And sometimes you have all these plans, but then actually when you're doing them all, and then you feel bad if you don't do whatever you said you were going to do. So I suppose it sort of ties in with that a bit.
Yeah. You're just giving yourself another stick to beat yourself with, really, aren't you? So it's about not overdoing, not having hundreds of things, and just having really small things. If you want to do exercise, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, really tiny little amounts, and you can build that up if you want. But I think it's about making that choice, isn't it? A lot of times we do things because we think they're good for us or we should do them. If we're doing them from that standpoint, we're just adding to our stress. If it's something you genuinely, connect with and you want to do, you're going to more likely to do it and keep with it, rather than it's something on our tick list that we feel we should, the lovely should word.
Yeah. Sometimes we sort of take on more than we can handle, which is never a good thing.
Balance. It's about balance.
Someone's put, have you got any advice? What advice would you give to people who turn to unhelpful coping strategies?
Sorry, Mick, I keep coming in. Did you want to come in?
No.
Again, it's about, first of all, recognizing that you're doing that, because often these happen without us really noticing, having an odd glass of wine or an odd beer at night because it's been a bit of a difficult day. And then before you know it, that's your habit and you're doing that regularly. So noticing it's the first point. And then, depending on where you are down that route, it could just be thinking about what other habit could I put in its place. So if when you come off a call, if you're really like this and at the end of the day you naturally go for the drink, okay, what habit can I change there? Can I go for a 10-minute walk around the block or something, just so I've changed that routine? Because a lot of this is just routine and habit, and it's how do we train our mind to have a different habit at that point?
One of the things I like to do if I'm feeling a bit stressed out for whatever reasons, I like to look on YouTube and look at a load of YouTube videos about crafting. And there's I can spend probably hours watching YouTube, watching somebody turn something into a melon into a rose and stuff like that. And then I'll disappear into the garage for hours, not with a melon, but I'll do something crafty while I'm out there and produce all sorts of bits and pieces. So if you've got that capacity, just by watching somebody else, make something from scraps of wood or material or baking cakes and stuff like that, that does help me, deal with stress. It makes me forget what's going on at work, at home, and you're just, you can self-reflect and enjoy somebody else's craftiness. That's the right word.
Brilliant. I've made a lot of use of YouTube during lockdown as well, with like the free fitness videos and all that kind of thing. There's so much out there, isn't there? It's brilliant. So running out of time now, unfortunately, but any final thoughts from you both? Perhaps you could share one top tip. Well, Mick, you just did. I don't know if you've got another one, or you wanted to share a top tip for managing stress. Any more?
Again, it goes back to the worry tree in what Tracy was saying. If you can't control it, forget about it. If you can't do anything about it, stress is a difference between pressure and stress. Pressure of work and stress are two different things. Stress, when you notice you feel stress, go and do something different. Take the time out. Go and sit in the bath. Turn the radio on. We can't get out of the house. With COVID and whatever, you may be locked in with your partner, your kids and whatever, but you need to make sure you've got some free time, some free space in the bath, in the shower, away from everybody. That's my top tip.
Yeah. Self-care is so important.
Yes.
Yeah. Tracy, have you got any final?
I guess again, it's just about finding what works for you. So it's again not putting extra pressure on yourself to add something else to your to-do list, but finding something that you enjoy. And Mick says actually getting in the flow, so you're not overthinking and you're not over worrying about everything, and finding a hobby or an activity that just fits with you and fits into your day-to-day life. Really, small things.
Definitely. And I hope people have got lots of tips from today and lots of things you can start doing yourselves when you get the time. Do take a look at the health and wellbeing learning theme and the mental health learning theme that we have on the Climbing Frame website, as there's lots of resources in there and publications, and there's also helplines listed there too, which Tracy mentioned earlier. Also, do check out what your trade union is doing with regards to mental health, as there is lots of useful resources out there and workshops and so much great work going on. And that's all we've got time for, unfortunately. Thank you ever so much to Tracy and Mick for your contributions today. And thank you all for joining us. We hope you found the session useful. As I said earlier, we'll be adding it to the Union Learn webinars page and also the Union Learn YouTube channel. And we'll send out the useful links that have been mentioned throughout the session as well. So thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we hope to see you for another Union Learn webinar soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.